The storm had passed, but the world did not feel clean. A strange stillness had settled over the land, heavy and watchful. Ash remnants of a battle fought and won clung to the air like secrets unspoken, a fine grey powder that coated every surface and muted the colors of the dawn that should have been breaking. But there was no dawn. Instead, the sky was dominated by a crimson moon, its light thick, heavy, and seemingly alive. It wasn't the pale, silvery glow of a normal night. This was a visceral, bloody light that painted the landscape in shades of rust and wine. Beneath this ominous celestial body, the family stood. They were a strange and weary assembly, huddled together not just for warmth, but for the shared comfort of their unbreakable bond. The battle had taken its toll. Mars, his usual charismatic strength now muted by exhaustion, leaned heavily against a shattered oak tree. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a deep, drained rumble. The veil is gone, but the night feels older. He wasn't just stating an observation. He was feeling it in his very bones, a primal shift in the fabric of their reality. The barrier between worlds, the very thing they had fought to protect, had dissolved, and something ancient had awakened in its absence. Liane, her gaze lost in the haunting crimson glow of the moon, answered in a soft, distant tone. "Because it remembers us now." Her words hung in the air, a chilling premonition. Before, they were ghosts in the system, anomalies moving through the shadows. Now, the world itself, the very essence of the night, was aware of them. They were no longer hidden, they were marked. A low growl, more weariness than aggression, rumbled from Father's chest. His massive form was tense, his senses on high alert. "I can still hear it," the whisper from the other side. Even with the veil shattered, the echoes of what lay beyond lingered, a faint, insidious murmur that promised chaos and power in equal measure. He could feel it clawing at the edges of his mind, a constant, nagging presence. Little Zika, the smallest and most vulnerable of their group, looked up at the towering figures around her, her child's voice small but laced with a profound curiosity that belied her years. "Is it gone forever?" she asked, her innocent question cutting through the heavy tension. She was asking about the enemy, the great and terrible force they had just vanquished. But the question felt larger, encompassing the very peace they had fought for. Was anything ever truly gone forever? A profound silence answered her. The only sounds were the mournful whistle of the wind through a cracked window pane of a nearby ruin and the faint creaking of a floorboard somewhere within its shadowy depths. Zoe, the loyal canine companion, let out a soft whine, pressing closer to Father's leg, her animal senses picking up on the unsettling atmosphere. From the shadows, Fluffy the cat offered a gentle purr that quickly turned into a low hiss, her emerald eyes fixed on something unseen in the darkness. Then, a sound broke the stillness, a single, slow, echoing toll of a distant bell. It was a sound out of time, a funereal chime that seemed to mark not the passing of an hour, but the beginning of a new, uncertain era. As the final resonance of the bell faded into the oppressive quiet, something impossible began to happen. In the unwavering red glow of the moon, a mark appeared on each of their wrists. It wasn't a burn or a tattoo, but something far stranger. Faint, glowing symbols materialized on their skin, intricate patterns of light that pulsed with a soft, ethereal energy. They were sigils of the eclipse's aftermath, a permanent brand left by the celestial event that had changed everything. Liane was the first to understand. Her whisper was barely audible, a breath of awe and fear. "It's binding us to the blood moon." The marks were not just a scar from their battle. They were a connection, a tether to the raw, ancient power now bathing the world. Maz stared at the symbol glowing on his own wrist, a grim understanding dawning in his eyes. "An oath," he said, his voice heavy. "An oath written in our veins." They had not simply survived. They had been chosen, sworn into a pact they had not consciously made. A low, resonant hum began to build in the air around them, a magical tone that flickered and wavered like the flame of a candle. It seemed to emanate from the marks on their wrists, a symphony of power that wove them together. And then, a voice spoke. It was not a voice any of them recognized, yet it felt impossibly ancient, echoing from the very stones and trees around them. "The family will not fall, but to stand, one must pay the price." The words hung in the air, a promise and a threat. Zika, her small body trembling, shrank back against Liane, her voice barely a whisper. "What price?" Lian's arms wrapped around the child, her own fear momentarily forgotten in a surge of protective instinct. Her voice was firm, an unbreakable shield. Not you, little moon, never you. She would let the world burn before she allowed any harm to come to the child. The father's growl deepened, a promise of violence to any who would dare try. If the night demands a sacrifice, it will be mine. It was not a boast, but a simple statement of fact. He was the shield, the protector. It was his duty, his purpose. The heartbeat like rhythm that had been thrumming beneath the silence began to grow faster, more urgent. In the distance, thunder murmured again, a restless echo of the storm that had passed. The air itself began to shimmer, the red light of the moon weaving intricate patterns around them, a living tapestry of energy. With each pulse of the blood moon, new sensations flooded their minds. They weren't just seeing the red light, they were experiencing it. Memories that were not their own, of lives once lived, of promises once broken, of ancient sorrows and forgotten triumph flowed into them, carried on the crimson tide. It was the history of the night itself, a legacy of power and pain. Maz turned to Lian, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrible comprehension. He whispered her name, his voice filled with a new kind of awe. "Do you hear it, Lian, the ancient vow?" She nodded, her own mind reeling from the influx of spectral knowledge. Yes, the oath of the eclipse. It was a pact made countless eons ago, a promise between mortals and the celestial powers that governed the darkness, a pact they had now inherited. Faint, ethereal chanting began to swirl around them, indistinct whispers that sounded like wind whistling through ancient stone corridors. The voices were countless, the ghosts of all who had borne the mark before them, their words weaving a complex spell of binding and purpose. Instinctively, the family joined hands. Maz took Zika's small hand, and Lian took father's. As their circle completed, the marks on their wrists flared, glowing brighter with each shared breath. They pulsed in unison, one pulse, one breath, one soul bound by the moon's undeniable command. The ancient words of the oath came to them then, not from memory, but from the blood that now sang in their veins. Maz's voice, deep and resonant, began the incantation. "By blood and by night," Lian continued, her voice clear and strong despite the torrent of feelings coursing through her. "By shadow and sight." Father's voice, a low and steady growl, added the final pledge. "We remain, the family." A moment of profound silence followed their vow. Then Zika, her eyes still wide but no longer filled with fear, only a solemn wonder, whispered the final, most important question. "Forever." The crimson light of the moon seemed to swell, a final, intense pulse of power that bathed them in its glow, sealing their oath. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The light softened, the humming ceased, and an almost peaceful silence descended. The moon remained, a silent, bloody witness in the sky. And in that quiet, the narrator's voice returned, soft and chilling, a final, haunting promise. "Forever, little one. For the night never forgets those who swear beneath its moon." A final, deafening thunderclap ripped through the sky, a punctuating mark on their new reality. As its echo faded, it was replaced by the lonely, mournful howl of a distant wolf, a sound that was both a lament and a declaration. And then, only silence, and the faint, drifting notes of a piano, a melody of sorrow and strength, playing out the end of one chapter and the beginning of the next.